It's now 6 o'clock. Chair will call this. This would be the April 19th board meeting, Fairfield County School Board meeting to order. The public have been duly notified, and I do confirm the form. It's time the chair will entertain a motion to go into executive session for personnel matters. Could I get a motion, please?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we enter executive session for personnel matters only.
Sarah made a motion to go into executive session for personnel matter, second by Pastor Jackson. All in favor, somebody raising of the right hand. That would be 7-0. We will be in executive session no longer than 6:30, but probably shorter than that. Probably out by 6:50.
But I did. At first I think I was saying, should I just take it? I think I lost my.
No, that was thanks.
Yeah. No, I didn't know what it did. I didn't know
Wait a minute. We going? Oh, you gotta start.
Yeah, what if you yeah, but if they supposed to move like that.
Right, right.
Yeah, I did. I didn't. Yeah, like. Yeah, but you do Friday for me. That's what I was doing. I do, but when they say that I read, I shouldn't let it. But it was one thing. Sometimes it's just like they don't have to do like. I don't know. I also like him, like, yeah, I had to test this. That's correct. Two for sure. Usually one is covered. Okay. She said. Okay.
Time, we will entertain a motion to exit executive session. No actions were taken in executive session.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we exit executive session with no actions taken, provided I get a second.
Second such motion. Motion made by Ms. Harris, second by Dr. Harrison, and Harris. All in favor, show by raising the right hand. That would be 7. At this time, I'm giving you some glasses. We will approve the agenda. Okay. Welcome everyone to our April 19th board meeting. We're all out there. We thank you parents, we thank you students, thank everyone for supporting our school district. At this time, we will have a pledge, leads in the moment of silence by our secretary. Stand. Let's have a moment of silence. Maybe see. Thank you. This time.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we approve the agenda as presented.
Do you have a second? Motion made by Ms. Harris, to approve the agenda as presented, second by Ms. Green. All in favor, show by raising the right hand. That would be 7. At the time, do we have any public comment? No, sir. Moving on, this time we have presentation recognition from Dr. Avery.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Chairman Miller, members of the board, Superintendent Dr. Green. We are excited tonight and proud to recognize the stellar achievements of our Fairfield County School District scholars. These students had the opportunity to compete in the Junior Beta Club Convention held in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina on January 12th through January 14th. Our scholars competed in several academic and arts-related competitions and placed in the top 10. We will start our presentations tonight with Fairfield Middle School, and if Mr. Brunson, along with Ms. McElrath, the club sponsor, along with Dr. Green, if you can come forward. And each student tonight will receive a certificate. Gabrielle Ashford, she received second place or seventh place in drawing. Eighth grade students, Kaya Chappelle won second place in speech.
That's smile. Good job.
Melissa McKinney, she won sixth place in jury. Moving on to Fairfield Elementary, Dr. Tammy Martin, principal, and Ms. Missy Bean, club sponsor.
And Dr. Simpson.
And Dr. Simpson. Jackie Contreras won third place, ELA.
Take a picture with me. Good job. Good job.
Maya Cole won fourth place in math. Chase Ford won fifth place in science. And these students are in fourth grade. Fifth grade, Julian Barbosa won third place in CLA.
Yeah, both sides. All right.
Jahara Williams won first place ELA. Elementary principal, Ms. Mara Bramlett, and Ms. Roy is the club sponsor. And these students are in fourth grade. Braylon Brinson won third place in social studies. Carmen Brown won fifth place ELA. Nehemiah Owens, fourth place, elementary creative writing. And lastly, Nathaniel Winchester won third place in science. Give all of
Oh, yeah. Got it. All right.
all of our scholars a round of applause.
Just talk, okay, all right, there's a new setup they got here. First of all, let me take this opportunity to thank all of our outstanding Fairfield County School District scholars for representing us at the Beta Club convention. When you get the opportunity to travel to these conventions, you get an opportunity to really compete with students all over the state and get to measure exactly how prepared you are. And we are very appreciative of those parents who were willing to send you down there and let you represent this district. So congratulations on a job well done. We know that this is only the beginning of some outstanding things in your academic and personal futures. Give another round of applause.
At this time, we have users of the Fairfield County School District, both school district office. Mr.
Bring it. Good city. Okay, okay, not, okay, all right, we'll do.
I'd first like to start off with that was a Hartwell. That was great. That was great. First of all, Chairman, Ms. Harrison, Boyd, Dr. Green, thank you for allowing me to speak to you. Some of y'all may know when we started, Dr. Green was with us. Dr. Green is no longer here in South Carolina. He had a medical issue and had moved back to South Carolina. That put me up to president, and Dexter Webb is now director of operations. We are a private, non-profit 501c3 program. And I'm very well pleased to offer this proposal to you tonight. Why we offer this the way we do, most of y'all may know me of my background, fire rescue paramedic here in Fairfield for quite a few years. And we've got to put our youth that's getting off track, we've got to find something to put them back on track. So, latchkey is a term that they use where the students are not supervised from 3 to 6 p.m. And that time and lack of supervision gets some of our children in trouble. They say some. Latchkey is, like I said, a program where the parents, guard is not home and the kids get involved with the grown people. Before we go much further, I'd like to let you know who our board of directors are. Sheriff Will Montgomery. Captain Pete Jackson, County of Winsboro. Mark Hill. Stephen Patterson, and we currently have one vacancy. If you would, when you listen to the presentation, think about when the schools are in operation, we are not. When the schools are not in operation, you will be. And it's very important to know that the whole intent is to educate, but not let kids know we're educated. Let's have fun. Programs that we are offering or will be offering after school, that is from the 5th to the 8th grade. Dr. Swillett, the high school principal, has told me, as well as others, that each one is going to get off base. They're going to do it before they get to the high school. So that's where we back up for the 5th to the 8th grade. We have activities planned that are not your average activities. And then we plan to have a summer school. Like I said, when schools are down, we're operational. During this planning of this, I spoke with Dr. Green, Chairman Davis, 4-H, the elementary school principal, middle school principal, Midlands Tech, Jeremy Cato has offered his advice. South Carolina DNR, South Carolina Parks and Recreation and Tourism, as well as Mr. Furman Miller, who is over the regional Midlands region of the Palmetto Conservation. A couple of the plans that we plan to offer is bicycling. Some children do not have a bicycle. We have a lot of bicycles that's donated to us. Let's teach the youth how to repair them. Give them the tubes, the tires, the chains, and show them how to fix bicycles. The bicycles, to me, and Dr. Gray and I spoke about how that puts perspective to the STEM program. Why is the pressure of a tire what it is? What happens when it's low? What happens when it goes inflated? These help educate the youth in a way that they can see it, touch it, feel it. Another one, as one of your bus drivers, some of our students have never seen the mountains, never seen the ocean. So let's teach them how to fish. We have DNR, like I mentioned, we have the state parks, numerous other people. Let's take them to Lake Wateree, teach them how to fish. Take them to Monticello. Let's take them to Waynesville, where they can trout fish. A lot of these kids have never trout fished. So I was talking to Miss Wayne. Let's take them to the ocean. Let's teach them how to pier fish. Well, I've never done that. Let's take them on a deep sea fishing adventure. There's a lot of people who have never been there. Some of the other programs that we like to offer. I am the chairman of the Fairfield County Airport. Let's teach them aviation. As you can tell, our world is going to outer space. It used to be a joke in my days, it's not a joke no more. We have personal aircraft. We have private companies going to outer space. Let's teach them the physics behind the lift of an airplane. If there's just a lot of things that we can do there. Yes, this is a 4-year group that we can slow down. And teach them. Personal finance. The school district teaches math, but personal finance seems to miss it. For the kids in here that are sharp in math and science, why not meteorology? Or NOAA, National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, that's a mouthful. Those and several of our TV weather people have said, I like that idea. Let's get these young people ready for that. That's a very high paying job, very admirable. Some of our courses that are taught in our career centers, we're going to take a step back and slow it down. Computer science. Mr. Cato mentioned there's a guy in Columbia that takes computers, builds them from the ground up. Let's teach that to these kids. That's where we're going. Computers. If you don't have most everybody in here has a computer on them right now. Environmental and natural resources. Let's teach them that the woods is not a bad place. Know what's there, know the safety, and enjoy nature. Construction is one that Mr. Cato asked me to get behind. We do have construction in our career center. What he wants me to do is back up and combine the electricity, water, woodworking, slow it down, bring it to their level, get them interested. Food service. I changed the name from culinary arts because it wouldn't be proper for them to be culinary arts. We can teach these kids how to fix simple meals. Graphic arts. Health. As I said, I'm an ex-paramedic. Health is always in my background. Let's teach them nursing, x-ray, radiology, all the different things. Again, slow it down. Do it to it.
Mr. Sis,
Yes, sir.
I want to give them an opportunity to ask you some questions, so I want you to speed it up a little bit so we can, how much longer we have.
Okay. Ms. Conlon,
What your request is of the board.
we are requesting a 99-year lease for $1 per year for the old school district property. That would give us a place to call home, and for these students to be under our watch and keep them out of trouble. That's bringing it down to the short of the last. And, like Dr. Green says, if you have a question or a comment. Yes, go right ahead.
If you were to discontinue your program within this 99-year, would the contract then be voided?
Yes, it could be. On either side with a notice. And I do request that this be a written contract, because 99 years from now, and the reason I got the 99 years, community fire department, their property comes from the Rockton Baptist Church, and that's their idea. If y'all wish to have something different, we can talk about that.
But since I'm planning on being around 99 years,
If you would,
I'm gonna be in history. I plan to be around 99 years.
I don't think I.
But that's my plan.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Sid.
Yes.
So with all the things that you are planning to bring in for these kids, what kind of funds are y'all gonna have to?
We have corporate funding, sponsorship, donations. And I really cannot get into that until we have a place to bring mail on.
And so if y'all get this building and set up for the kids, so how are you planning on transporting them to and from? The parents have to bring them or?
No. According to Mr. Danny Miller, the school buses could bring them from the schools to our facility, and then the parents would pick them up at the end of the program. We
Okay.
already have a charter bus to provide transportation to the mountains, to the beach, to Columbia Airport, other places.
Okay, so I thought that it was just gonna be summer, so you're gonna be doing it during school too?
Yes,
Okay,
from 3 to 6, and your national statistics say that's when the trouble is on.
Mr. Says, if we granted you this 99-year lease, what would be the school district's responsibility for upkeep, maintenance, bringing the building up to code, and what would be our liabilities if something happened at the property?
Upkeep would be totally us. That would be part of the contract. I don't foresee the school district doing that. Liability would be on our insurance as a general liability policy.
Do you have basic curriculum that you're going to be following?
To a degree, when we get further into the career center programs, I'd like to meet with that career instructor and make sure our bases are together. So we're not teaching off of each other. We have the same curriculum.
Any more questions?
Could we meet with them and talk about it again?
It's not an action item.
No, he just, this is just a presentation, just informing us, you know, we're gonna think about it. And we'll get back with you.
I'm gonna go one question.
That's
To Mr. Sis. I'm looking at the curriculum and the program, and yes, it's important to build ELA, reading and social studies, but is there room for fine arts?
So I'd say there's room for any and everything that we have. If it educates our youth, if it keeps them out of trouble, it sets them up for a better step into your career center. It helps everyone.
Yeah, no, if I could just commend Mr. Sis, who has been always a consummate community-minded individual. I've spoken to Mr. Sis about lots of ideas over the years, and he is constantly thinking about how we can improve conditions in Fairfield County. And Mr. Sis, I'll tell you, I have gone through a lot of bad ideas over my career, but only get the bad idea, good ideas, go through the bad ideas. So I appreciate you being willing to push the envelope and really explore different things that we can do to improve the trajectory of young people in our community. So on behalf of the Board of Trustees, I appreciate you for being willing to be a partner in that regard. Because too often, too many people in our community sit around and talk about how kids are headed in the wrong direction, but not necessarily talking about what they can do to improve the direction that they're headed. And everybody can talk about the problem, but it takes someone who's really invested to be a part of changing the situation. So rather agree or disagree with what you're proposing, you are proposing something, and we appreciate you for that.
And one step further.
Yeah.
I would appreciate for this to be approved. I would also like for each one of you to stay in it with me. If we have another program that we can add or subtract, let's do it. Ms. Green and I was discussing chaperones. Chaperones that are already part of the school system, we don't have to worry about a background check. We don't have to worry about the teacher. They're already employed. So if Ms. Green wants to go to the sea fishing, come on.
I'm gonna let you have that deep sea fishing liability. Too much to go wrong with that. You gotta show it, I'll let you take care of it. Not that far. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate it.
What it is for March 15th.
I make a motion, we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve the March 15 regular call board meeting.
Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Mr. Davis. We'll give you all time. Right. Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Mr. Davis. Board minutes of March the 15th. Be approved, all in favor, so by raising the right hand. That would be 7-0. At this time, we have a superintendent report from Dr. Raymond.
Chairman Miller, members of the board, you know, this is always an exciting time as we kind of wrap up the school year. The month of May is when we generally have business text graduation. And as a function of our STEM Early College Academy, we historically have probably more students than any high school to receive their credentials from business tech. And I suspect this year will be no different. So on May 4th, at 7 o'clock at the Colonial Life Arena, we will be presenting, not us, but Dr. Rames and the board of Business Technical College will be presenting associate's degrees to several students from Fairfield Central High School who have earned their associates even before they earn their high school diploma. And that's always an amazing feat when I look at that here it is earning their associate's degree and they won't get their high school diploma for another month or so. And so if you are able to join us on the 4th, I would encourage you at 7 o'clock at the Colonial Life Arena. We're still in the midst of spring sports, softball, soccer, baseball, track. I mean, we have all kinds of things going on at this point in time. And so if you're interested in seeing some good sports, stop by the high school almost any day. And I can assure you that there's probably something going on. I did a soccer match today, and my wife said, you're gonna be there because one of my youngest daughter who's still in school plays soccer. I said, no, I won't be there initially, but hopefully we'll get out in time for what I hope will be a win for the Lady Griffin soccer team. And so that I think starts at about 5:30. We get out in time out. We can check out the end of that match. And then finally, Kevin is going to present a little bit more on this, but the South Carolina House really made some modifications to the new education funding proposal that came out. Probably the Senate made some modifications to the proposal that came out of the House. And I talked about this a little bit last month because there was a rumor out there that there was a new funding proposal that was gonna provide a $4,000 raise to all teachers, which went down. All right, there was a proposal that was gonna raise a minimum salary schedule of $4,000 from 36 to $40,000. But for districts like ours that are already paying above the minimum, we wouldn't be required to do anything. Well, the Senate made some modifications to the House's proposal, and they changed it from a $4,000 increase to a $2,000 increase. And this is still kind of a moving target. And so we are 100% sure about what's ultimately going to be the new education funding proposal, but there is a move to change it. And it's important to note that it's being changed by proviso. And when I say proviso, we're talking about this is something that is only in place for 1 year, not permanent law. And there are some questions about whether we should change the education funding proposal through proviso because it will have a long-term consequence if this is ultimately adopted. I know you've heard for years that the state of South Carolina has underfunded education based on the law that was passed, I think, back in 1984. And based on the current education funding proposal, they have been underfunding. Well, if this new proposal is adopted, there is no thing as underfunding anymore. Whatever they give you is what you were supposed to have. All right. So that is part of what we need to recognize in this new education funding proposal. That whatever they give you is what you were supposed to have. And therefore, there is no longer an underfunding as it relates to education. Any questions about any of those things that I just referenced?
Right, Dr. Green, Mr. Chair.
Right.
You know, the teacher of the year is that day too. Maybe and at 7 o'clock.
Yeah.
So I don't know if anybody had already signed up to go. I think that time is paid, but I'm going to see kids.
And Ms. Harrison, you know, it's funny you said that. I did speak to Dr. Raines. What Ms. Harrison was mentioning was the teacher of the year banquet for South Carolina is the same day as the Middle Tech graduation. And a couple of years ago, it was the same day. And I ended up going to the graduation and leaving early so I could come to the teacher of the year banquet, which is probably what I'm going to do again this year, try and kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I told Mr. Raines, y'all got to do a better job scheduling. I got to put that on the same day. But that is a conflict. Teacher of the year banquet, which I think some of you have already made plans to attend. It's going to be almost the same day and same time as the Business Tech graduation. Thanks for bringing that to my attention, sir.
One thing about it, I guess, it's right up the street, so we put our running shoes on and run up there. Go right ahead, Dr. Green.
So it is in close proximity. And then the last thing I'll report, our COVID report for today, as Ms. Brown pulls it up, there's not a lot of information to really share. As you know, DHEC has really eliminated a lot of the testing sites. There are a lot of people who are doing home tests and not necessarily testing through any DHEC locations or any pharmacy location. We aren't necessarily reporting any kind of or requiring any kind of quarantine anymore. So the numbers would dictate that we are in a much different place relative to COVID-19. Now, I caution you as you look at those numbers, okay? We'll move to the next slide, Ms. Brown. Okay, as Ms. Brown is getting the slides prepared, the numbers are virtually 0 across the board. Since our last presentation, we've had virtually no student cases, virtually no staff cases, but I'll tell you that's probably not accurate. Okay. And the problem is if someone does a home test for COVID-19 and they are positive, they may stay home and isolate themselves, but they don't necessarily report that information to us, and therefore no one knows that they were positive. So as you look at these numbers and you say, wow, we went from several cases to 0 cases as of 1/15, I caution you that those numbers are probably not accurate. Next slide, Ms. Brown. Same thing with staff cases. You'll see as of April 15, we had 0 cases. I know for a fact that we have had at least 1 staff case recently, who told me they had a pretty rough go of it relative to COVID. But that was after the 15. But I suspect, once again, those numbers aren't totally accurate. Now, we'll continue to progress in a manner that we have been relative to the new protocols. As I said, as long as our numbers are below 10% in each respective site, then we can continue with our current protocol, which is not have any kind of quarantine requirement. And the way this is structured in terms of administering home tests, I don't suspect we're going to be above 10% in any respective site anytime soon. Any questions?
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes,
so Dr. Green, so everything pretty much gonna kind of go back to normal now, like, we was having a lot of virtual, Zoom programs. I know with class might coming up, and all. I think they did both last year, the Zoom and in person. I know I did Zoom, I think they did in person too. So I suspect everything gonna kind of just go back to normal.
Yeah, so we are kind of transitioning, quote unquote, kind of back to normal. I was cautioned a bit that things can change.
Yeah.
But as you know, we relaxed our mask requirement. If you go in schools, you'll see a lot fewer, but you see a lot more people who aren't wearing masks. People are getting a lot more comfortable. You probably read where a judge ruled that the Biden administration couldn't maintain the mask requirement on airplanes. And so you're no longer required to wear masks on airplanes. I think they anticipate that that's coming, that they're going to add public transportation to that as well in the coming days. So we are, as a country, beginning to transition back to normal. Now, the question is, are we going to see an uptick in the virus? Are we going to have to maybe pull back some of these things that we ended up eliminating? Only time will tell that, Pastor Jackson. You know, me and my wife and my youngest daughter ended up, and one of her friends ended up going down to Destin, Florida, for spring break, just to get away for a bit. And I'll tell you, we were there for a couple of days. I don't know if I saw a mask in Destin, Florida. I don't know if I saw a mask in Destin, Florida. And so no one in Destin, Florida was wearing a mask. Way out of place if you're wearing a mask. And so I think that's kind of where we're headed as a country. And prayerfully, things will continue to move in the right direction, and these new variants pop their heads, and we see an uptick in hospitalizations or deaths. Because as Ms. Harrison shared with me last week, we still have some people who are getting sick, and still have some people who are succumbing to the virus. Okay, and so we will continue to be diligent and monitor things and take any precautions that we absolutely can.
Just like, I think we're probably gonna have to look at this thing like we look at the flu every year. There's a different strain that comes every year, and we have to deal with it. I believe that the next one that's coming, they say that they are contagious, but they won't make you as sick. So I still think we probably gonna have to deal with the shot.
Yeah, Pastor Jackson, I was thinking the same thing, that we probably will be moving to a stage where we end up doing an annual COVID shot, the same way we do an annual flu shot. And for people who've been taking the flu shot every year, that's just something that you become accustomed to. And so I think we are probably headed in that direction. All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. This time, operations and finance. Ms. Rob.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The first item under operations and finance is the March finance report. This is submitted for your information and review. I will say, I know a few months ago, I think someone asked about projection. Right now, we are currently where we need to be for this time of year. Things are still running pretty smoothly. And it appears as though we will have probably about $1 million that will come out of the fund balance. Now, for this year, we budgeted that we had about 2.6 million coming out. However, last year when we did the budget, we said that we would try to lessen that impact by using some of our ESSER funds. And at the time we did the budget, we weren't sure about how much we could do in terms of salaries and moving some of that into ESSER, but less of that impact. So now that the year is going through and we've got the plan approved and implemented, it looks like we will be able to take about $1 million out of the fund balance as opposed to 2.6 million. And last year we did take 1.1 million out of the fund balance. So we should end up about the same place in terms of our final results and impact on the fund balance for this year as we did last year.
So next question. Sure. So what's your projection on the fund balance if we take, I'll leave it at?
If we take $1 million out, currently at the end of last year, we were at 12.8 million. So that'll put us at about 11.2 at the end. And I had Dr. Green asked earlier today, we were talking back in, just for perspective, back in 2012, back when he started, the fund balance was at 4.6 million. So it's gone way up significantly in the last 10 years. So that just put that in perspective.
So we ready for next?
And the next item in the board packet is a facility usage request. And this is from the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And the superintendent recommends the board approve the waiver of fees for the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission to hold a community meeting for Fairfield County residents and other concerned citizens regarding performance of BC Summer Nuclear Station 1 on May 5th, 2022 at 5 p.m. at Corey School, the Corey Liston School of Technology. There is the facility usage request in the board packet for your review.
Dr., you want to elaborate a little bit on that?
Yeah, so the Nuclear Regulatory Commission has been hosting these meetings at McCoy Liston School of Technology for many years. I never attended one. I suspect that primarily they really kind of talk about safety relative to nuclear facility, any kind of procedural changes that have occurred over the course of the year. Give residents an opportunity to ask any questions and solicit any information. They historically have asked for a facility, a waiver of fees, since they are our biggest taxpayer in the county. I feel it would be appropriate for us to do a waiver of fees for them to host those meetings. But it is relatively common for them to present information during these meetings and to host it at the court.
Do we get a motion?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve the waiver of fees for the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission to hold a community meeting for Fairfield County residents and other concerned citizens regarding the performance of BC Summer Nuclear Station 1 on May 5th, 2022 at 5 p.m. at McCoy Liston School of Technology.
Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Mr. Davis, all in favor of giving the waiver and letting him use the facility, show by the raising of the right hand. That would be 7-0. Mr. Robinson?
All right, and the third item is the first reading of the fiscal year 22-23 budget. And the recommendation, the superintendent is recommending board approval of the first reading of the fiscal year 22-23 budget, amount of $43,379,790, which includes no change in millage.
Say that again.
I'm trying to get it.
Say that again.
Which includes no change in millage.
Or anybody out there, we're not, don't change them, we're not raising no taxes. Right? You want, got anything else you want to say before we go into a motion?
No, I think it's a motion. Okay, this budget for, proposed budget for next year really is in a lot of ways similar to our current budget. The proposed budget of $43.4 billion is about $14,000 lower than the current budget. There's no real change in our projected property tax revenues. As you're aware, during the couple of years ago, we had a significant decrease in property tax revenues. My estimate, which is based on what we're receiving now, is that there will be no significant decrease next year. Now, that's always subject to change because there is no real crystal ball to project what our property tax revenue will be next year. But we always base next year's property tax revenues on what we're receiving currently. So I'm saying currently, it looks like we should be okay if we continue with the same projection for next year based on what we're receiving this year. As Dr. Green mentioned, this budget is really based upon what was passed in the State House by the South Carolina House of Representatives. Their budget reflects the governor's funding proposal for school districts. I won't go into a lot of detail on that. It's been discussed quite a bit. We also, as I mentioned earlier, plan to use ESSER funds again for positions in fiscal year 22-23. And that's why this budget will really be similar for next year to the one we currently have, where we have positions utilizing our ESSER funds. Now, one important note is that the ESSER funds run out in the 23-24 school year. So next year will be currently, based on the amount of money we have that has not been planned for, next year will be the last year that we will have a full funding of money in ESSER to be able to fund all of the positions that we're putting in ESSER for next year. So in 23-24, there will be money available, however, not as much. So, we'll be fine for this upcoming year using ESSER funds, but that will diminish year after next. The other point that I mentioned, we are proposing using $1 million from the fund balance again next year. So last year, we used about 1.1 million. This year, I'm projecting we'll use about $1 million out of the fund balance. And then in fiscal year 23, in our budget, we're proposing using another $1 million out of the fund balance. So those kind of that's the overview of our budget. I will make two points about the governor's funding proposal and impact on our district. As Dr. Reed mentioned, the proposal really was to increase the minimum salary schedule to $4,000. Unfortunately, the message that was communicated or perceived by many is that it was a $4,000 increase for all school districts, regardless of whether you were paying above the minimum or not. Currently, we're about 14.8% above the minimum. So we weren't required to pay the $4,000. Now, as much as we would like to do that, based on the money that we were receiving in the funding proposal that was passed by the House, and we reviewed that, I think that was last month, we would have been about $2 million in the hole based on the funding that we would have received. We tried to implement that $4,000 increase for all teachers on all levels. And so therefore, right now, the consequences that we couldn't afford to pay that as it stands, of course, as Dr. Reed mentioned, the Senate has come up with an alternative in terms of the minimum teacher salary, and the funding will be different compared to the House. They both will have to meet, since the plans are so different, the House and the Senate, and come up with some sort of a compromise. So right now, we don't know what the final impact will be. So once that's determined, then we'll have a decision to make about how we will proceed with the teacher salary schedule. But for right now, in this budget, based on the inability for us to adequately fund the additional cost, the 4,000 increase is not included in this budget. The other key point I'll mention about the governor's funding proposal is that they basically took a number of different funding streams, and under the, I'll say, well-intentioned intent of trying to simplify things, they took these funding streams and combined them into basically one or two funding streams. But the consequence of that for us is that currently we have money in what's called at-risk funds and inter-district funds. Those are specific state pools of funds that we currently have salaries in and other expenditures. So under this funding proposal, those funds are being combined with all these other funds, and all of that will be moved to the general fund. So in essence, that means that the current salaries that we have out of those funds, the current expenditures that we spend every year, we also have to move that to the general fund. So that's really not an increase for us at all. It's almost as though I'm telling you, I'm giving you a $50 supplement every year for gas, and then I'm giving you a paycheck. Then the next year I switch and I say, I'm gonna take that $50, add it to your paycheck, that's an increase. Well, now you still got to pay for that gas from somewhere. So it's really not an increase, it's kind of a flip-flop, where money is just being moved from one place to another. And it appears as though it's an increase in some respects, but it's really not. So that's one of the consequences of the plan, is that some of the funds that are coming to us are funds that we really already have. It's just coming from a different place and being combined.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
I don't know, we ain't got to it yet, but I wanted to ask you that our policies, okay, it's classified, certified. Are they included in our budget here? That we still okay, we still gonna need about $1 million to go in, but that has been included.
Yes, sir. That is included as a part of the budget for the next school year. Of course, as I mentioned, the pressure will begin after next year when we don't have that full funding of ESSER funds available. So, that's going to create some pressure somewhere in terms of our expenditure. But for next year, that is included. 5,000, 3,000 is included as part of the budget for next year. And that's just a list of some of the funding streams, the current ones that we have this year, and then next year, how all of those got combined into one different funding stream, which it makes things simpler, but it, as I said before, in some respects, it's taking money we already have. If we already have designated for certain things, it's just moving it to another category, so it's not really additional funds. In terms of our revenues, the revenues really are not that much different. The most significant thing that we have, in terms of our local property tax revenues, it appears as though we will have about $400,000 more next year than we had in last year's budget. That's because we have a slight increase in property tax revenue, and 400,000 may seem like a lot, but based on the size of our budget, it's really not that significant. But that is a slight increase. And then also, we get money, I don't know if you recall, but many years ago, residential homeowners, if it's your primary home, you pay taxes on your primary residence for the operations of school districts. That was years ago. Now, still currently, residents pay for any debt associated with capital projects. But years ago, under Act 388, the legislature, they eliminated the residential property taxes for homeowners. And they replaced that with money that's coming through in the paying sales tax. So we are reimbursed for that loss of revenue, and that amount increases slightly every year. So next year, it looks like we'll get an additional about $200,000 out of that pool. So basically, our local property tax revenues will increase by projected by about $600,000 in total, based on the property tax increase and based on the residential reimbursement increase of about $200,000. The remaining revenue categories on the left, typically we were funded under the Education Finance Act, which is I hesitate to call it the old funding formulas. The current funding formula is now being changed under the governor's proposal. It's a little difficult to compare the funding streams from this year to next year, because as I showed you the chart before, so many things are now being combined from different funding streams. So it's really like comparing apples to oranges. The bottom line is that we're supposed to get in total under the House plan about an additional $700,000 compared to what we're currently getting. However, as I mentioned, some of that's money that we were already getting anyway. So really the net will be about an additional $300,000, which is just not that much. So there's not really a great impact for us financially in terms of a benefit, because as it's currently been passed by the House, by the governor's funding proposal plan. Fortunately, just due to the stability for next year that's projected under our local property tax revenues, because we have the ESSER funds, we're able to move some salaries into ESSER. That's kind of helped us to stay level for next year compared to where we are in this current year.
Mr. Ross, if I could just add a couple of points. First of all, I think there will probably be a legal challenge to the funding proposal that is currently being debated in the General Assembly. There are some questions about whether you could basically throw out the EFA Act and replace it with proviso, which is just basically temporary legislation that has to be renewed from year to year. And rather you adequately fund schools moving forward. The other thing that's important to note, as I said earlier, the Education Finance Act really outlines specifically how schools have to be funded every year. So you can make predictions if the General Assembly fully funds it based on the formula, what you will do to receive. With this new funding proposal, it is exactly what they want to give you. Okay, and though, you know, Ms. Robinson said that we won't be getting less than we were getting last year, next year, then that could totally go a different direction 2 years from now. And they can just create, you heard a lot about these class ratios, and which didn't mean anything, because that's not really based on actually how many students in classes, but based on how schools are being funded, well, you can change that number based on this new proposal anytime you want to. Okay, and so I think this really puts us in a very precarious spot long term. And so though we may look at it and the General Assembly said, well, nobody's gonna get more than they got last year, next year, but that has nothing to do with what you're gonna get 2 years from now, 3 years from now. There is no commitment that there continues to be increases, particularly based on inflation. So, you know, this is very concerning, this new funding proposal. I think it is obviously has some steam and people are totally behind it. But I think we can look back on this after a couple of years and say we are in a much worse situation. And it's important to note that the General Assembly has more recurring dollars than they've had ever. I'm not sure. I mean, the surpluses at the General Assembly is huge. As a matter of fact, I think they've issued $1 billion in permanent tax cuts. That's a billion with a B. I think $1 billion in permanent tax cuts. So there are some major changes that are occurring. Unfortunately, I think this new funding proposal is not going to be good for school districts. Now, the argument they make is, well, we're consolidating all of these funding streams, and that's going to give Kevin and the superintendent in places, school districts all over the state, more flexibility in how you spend the money. I mean, that's a common theme, where now you don't have to worry about different pots of money. It'll all be in one pot. But if the pot is smaller, it doesn't matter about the flexibility. Okay, and so I think Kevin has really illustrated, you know, sometimes we can play a little 3-card molly, if you will, and we just kind of moving money. Okay, not necessarily getting you more money, all right? So we take money from this pot, put it in this pot, put it in that pot, but when you look at it all, it's the same money, okay? And in some respects, it may even be less money. So I wanted to just share that and give you a little bit of context of where we are. I don't know, who knows what's going to ultimately come out of the General Assembly, but these are some of our concerns.
Absolutely.
Since we're here, and I know you hadn't got to it yet, Mr. Robinson, but our benefit package, you know, how higher is the benefit package this year? Because I know every year it goes up. And so, you know, we paying on, you know, of course, school district, everything goes up. So what's the percentage on that?
And actually, that was the next thing that I was going to cover on the kind of the expenditures. A lot of those things I've already talked about. But just to get into, of course, our largest category of expenditures is for salaries and benefits. And while our budget technically for salaries and benefits next year is going down, that's only because last year when we passed the budget, we had all of the ESSER salaries and benefits still in the general fund. We hadn't moved them yet. So for the 2021-22 budget, on the first column, we're looking at a budget of $36.2 billion. It includes a lot of salaries and benefits, a lot of positions that were in the general fund that we later moved into ESSER. The 22-23 budget already has those salaries and benefits in ESSER, so they're kind of two different perspectives. But Mr. Miller, to address your question, there are a lot of increases in the salary and benefit category. The main two, the retirement, the district has to pay, currently we're paying 22.81% of every dollar in retirement dollars. So employees have 9%, it comes out of their check, we pay 22.81. Next year, that's going up to 23.81. And then there's a significant increase currently proposed for health insurance. The district also pays a portion of every employee's health insurance cost. And next year, right now, that's going up 9% for next year, which is a significant number. Matter of fact, I can say I've never seen it go that high in all the years I've been doing. So that has a dramatic impact on our cost, as a district for benefits costs.
Okay, am I correct that that's going from 9 to 18 or?
Well,
18?
They said 18%, but the 18% doesn't really start until January, which is half a year, so we just say for the whole year, we just say 9%.
But it is going from 9 to 18, am I correct?
Well, it's going, in other words, the premium, so now your premium, if we paid $1,000 for an employee, in January, then it's gonna be $1,180, which would be 18% of that 1,000. So that's is an 18% increase depending on whether you cover it just you or you and your child or have full family. So whatever that cost is, if we as a district pay for each one of those plans, it will increase by 18% in January. And since I'm just doing a budget for the whole year, and it's increasing in January, I just say 9% for the whole year.
But everybody has to understand that benefits and salaries, those things go up. And so there's a lot of district is paying for the employees. That's how.
That's correct. And so that has a definite impact on our ability to do other things. And as Dr. Reed mentioned, they talk about the flexibility and give the districts flexibility. But you don't have any flexibility in paying additional retirement and paying additional health insurance costs. So, the majority of any district's cost is really in personnel costs. And unless you're going to just start cutting people, you don't really have a lot of flexibility at all. But the other costs, as mentioned before, Mr. Lowe, we also have the bonuses still included in the budget. That's about $2.8 million in bonuses. And then we also have even though we're not doing the 4,000 currently, still teachers will move up one step on their teacher schedule, and classified employees will move up a step on the classified scale, just as we've done in every year. So that will also increase the budget as well. And as I said earlier, the additional retirement, health insurance costs will cause the budget to rise as well. So the only reason that number really is lower is because we have ESSER. We moved a lot of the salaries in the ESSER for next year compared to what we had in this current budget.
Something you said about having $600,000 from yes, coming from the state. That's what you said?
I said I guess under the governor's proposal, that initially we were going to get additional 700 on paper, but 400,000 of that was money that we really already had. And salaries were tied to most of that money already. So that's really not additional money at all. It was kind of moving it to another category, which means we have to move those salaries to that category as well. So it's really not a significant increase for us at all in terms of that. We will see.
And all of that, 600,000 or 700,000 going in Chester. Also,
yes. The second category, unless there are any other questions about the salaries and benefits, the second category are purchase services, basically things like travel, services for repairs, contractors, those types of things. That's increasing. The bulk of that increase, we have some of those expenditures that I mentioned earlier that were attributable to money that was in state funds that are being moved to the general fund. So when we move that money to the general fund, because of the government's plan, all of those expenditures also had to move to the general fund as well. So that's the real reason why we have an increase in purchase services. And it's really the same thing in supplies and materials. We have a lot of supplies, things that we buy for some of the schools and some of those state funds that they're moving to the general fund. So we had to move that as well into the general fund. Our supplies and materials, things like the school supplies, also our utility costs are counted under supplies and materials. No significant increase there, really, the bulk of it is just moving expenditures from some of the state funds that will now be a part of the general fund. And the other categories, no real changes. That final category of transfers, that is money that primarily about 600,000, 650,000 that we spend on the money that we send to Chester for the children in the Bedford area. And that's the bulk of what we have budgeted under the transfer category.
And Mr. Robinson, if I could just speak to that, you know, very often when people talk about the revenues that Fairfield County receives, and we have been very fortunate because of the nuclear facility that we have been receiving pretty substantial resources. But people tend to forget that we're sending almost $650,000 a year to Chester, okay? And so we don't necessarily get the benefit of many of those students. Whenever they talk about how much we can spend per student, they look at our revenue, but they don't even consider that we send, you know, over $500,000 every year to Chester. Okay, and so I think that members of our community need to remember and recognize that fact that we have as a result of litigation that was filed right as I was entering as superintendent. We are sending sometimes $650,000 to $700,000 a year to Chester to educate their students. Okay, or students they say live in the Pea Ridge and in that area. Okay. Thank you.
And all of these things I kind of mentioned during the presentation. So just in summary, the budget revenues does equal the requested expenditures, $43,379,790. It does include a projection in the budget of taking, and I have there about $953,000 from the fund balance in order to balance that budget. There is no millage increase in the requested budget. Currently, it's 203.1 mils. That's our proposal for next year. So the district's requesting first reading approval of a budget of $43,379,790, which includes a millage of 203.1 mils, which is no increase.
Anybody got any questions?
We got a motion, we got a good motion. Yeah,
I know, anybody got any questions?
she just got the motion.
Did we get a motion?
Mr. Chair, I recommend the superintendent recommendation to approve first reading of the fiscal year 22-23 budget in the amount of $43,379,790, which includes no change in millage.
Can I get a second? Second such motion. Motion been made. Harris, second by Dr. Harris. Do we have a question there? All right, there.
No, we got it.
What's the question?
Oh, yeah, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Green, and I guess you can, I guess we can probably agree on this. Everything that I'm following down at the State House, it looks like everybody is geared towards just down in public education. It's barely nobody fighting for public education. Just like we, you know, Mike Fanning, he just fighting his heart out for public education. And with those vouchers, I heard one, I don't know if he was a House representative or a senator, he actually said, we are allowing them to go to get a better education. That's telling me that public schools are not giving a good education. That's basically what he's saying. So it's kind of depressing to me that all these bills that they are coming up with is all geared towards just doing away with public education. You can go to private schools. This is important to us, but education is not important to us.
Ms. Harrison, if I can speak to that, as you know, I testified before the Senate subcommittee on Bill 935. And as much as people talk about school choice, the bill that was passed is not school choice. And I think it's very important for people to recognize the legislation that was passed, first of all, giving private schools the authority to deny entry to any student that they wish. And so as much as people talk about giving parents an opportunity to make the choice that they think fits them, you aren't giving parents that opportunity. You're giving private schools the opportunity to choose who they want. All right. And so private schools actually have the ability, Ms. Green, to stand at the door based on the legislation and say, we don't take any special needs students. Okay, so private schools have the ability based on this legislation to stand at the doors and say, we don't take any special needs students. We won't take you because you had a baby. We won't take you because you're pregnant. We won't take you because you're gay. I mean, whatever they want to do, you say whatever they want to say. And so they have the authority to turn people away, which is fundamentally why I oppose any kind of adopted legislation, because you can't get the public dollar and not want the public student. Okay, and if you want the public dollar, my perspective is you should be willing to take all students. So anybody who talks about how this is about giving parents a choice, you push back on that, because if you really believe in giving parents a choice, then you tell private schools, you got to accept every parent who comes to the door who says, I want this choice. The second point is, which I found amazing, is that they are going to require these schools that are receiving this revenue, as Ms. Harrison said, to take the same assessments as public school students are taking. And so these assessments, this accountability model was so very important, so we could ensure that the public is getting a return on their investment, but not in this particular situation. Now they did make some compromise in that regard and say, well, we will require private schools who are receiving state dollars to administer assessments to students in grades 3 through 8 who have transferred from a public school, but not necessarily everybody in the school, but the students in high school who want to take anything. Okay, so all of these Algebra 1 and of course assessment, English 2 and of course assessment, U.S. history and of course assessment, all of these things that we are requiring students at high schools across the state to take, these private school students will not be required to take. And quite honestly, I question whether these things are really legal. And I think there will be some challenges to what has been passed. And so I said from the beginning, if the General Assembly really believes in school choice, do two things. Okay, if you really believe in it, say private schools will get state money has to accept every student. The same way Fairfield Central has to accept every student. The same way Myrtle Beach High School has to accept every student. Same way, King Street High School has to accept every student. If you really believe in school choice, you want parents to be able to choose, then you should require that all students have access. And not that private schools get to stand at the door and say, I'll take you, but you can't come, I'll take you, but you can't come, I'll take you, but you can't come. And the second part is be accountable the same way public schools are. So the same test that you require all public school students today, then let private schools take those same assessments. And then if you think that they're doing a better job, then I guess the results will show it. But you can't stand at the door. I mean, if I'm a principal, Mr. Miller, I need to stand at the door and pick and choose my clientele, I should get some great results. But I can stand at the door and say, you know what? You are EMD self-contained students, you're gonna rip my school so you can't come. But I can stand at the door and say, you know what? You got a mom on drugs who is providing you the kind of support I know is gonna be necessary for you to be the best student that you can be, so you can't come. I mean, if you can stand at your door and pick and choose your clientele, you ought to be able to get some great results. So you shouldn't have any issue with taking the same assessment. So this whole ruse that this is about parent choice simply is not the reality. Okay, so anybody who's thinking this is about empowering parents to make whatever choice they want to make, you set them straight. No, it's not. It's about private schools giving them the authority to make whatever choice they want to make. Okay, not about parents making that choice. By private schools making that choice, And people will see this very soon after this passes. When they decide, I want to try a different option, and they show up at some local private school door, and they say, thank you, but no thank you. You are welcome here. Okay? So this is absolutely not about parent choice. Okay? Not at all.
Any more questions? Mr. Bronson. There be none. Motion was made by Ms. Harrison, the first reading, second by Dr. Harris. All in favor of first reading, so by raising of the right hand. That would be 7-0. Human resources, thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This evening under Human Resources, item 1, the superintendent recommends the board approve certified staff resignations and terminations to be effective at the conclusion of the academic year 2021-22. This is presented to you in several exhibits. We'll begin with Exhibit 1A.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve certified educator resignation terminations to be effective at the conclusion of academic year 2021-22, Exhibit 1A.
Yes, sir. Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Pastor Jackson, Exhibit 1A. All in favor, so by the raising of the right hand. 7-0.
Next, Exhibit 1B. This requires a special motion.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I move that a formal complaint be sent on behalf of the board to the State Department of Education requesting that appropriate action be taken against a professional employee of Fairfield County School District, employee 1 whom pursuant to South Carolina Code and notated section 59-25-230 breached their individual employment contract with the district by failing to return to work.
Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Dr. Harris. All in favor, show by the showing of the right hand. That would be 7-0.
And lastly, under item 1, Exhibit 1C.
Okay, Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I make a motion, we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve certified administrative resignation termination to be effective at the conclusion of academic year 2021-22.
Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Ms. Green. All in favor, so by raising the right hand. That would be 7-0.
Under HR item number 2, the superintendent recommends the board approve certified educators for academic year 2022-23. These recommendations are presented to you in exhibits 2A and 2B.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion, we accept the superintendent recommendation to approve certified educators for academic year 2022-23, exhibit 2A, exhibit 2B.
Motion made by Ms. Harrison, second by Dr. Harris. But that's 2A and 2B. All in favor, show by raising of the right hand. That would be 7-0. Thank you. Yeah. This time we have a board chair report. I just want to inform the board that we talked with Mrs. Stephanie Lawrence, and she's the legal for the South Carolina School Board Association, in trying to set up our board retreat.
And then the date she gave me was June the 11th. Right, look at that, that's the only Saturday she has, and that we can do our budget, we do our board retreat, policy, all of it takes about probably 4 hours. From 9 to, what you say, 1, how's that sound? That's it, yeah. Everybody in agreement? So that's what we'll go with on our board retreat. Yeah. I'll notify and let her know that we will be doing our board retreat. Sarah, she got anything?
Yeah, I just wanna thank Dr. Green. We had cancer kickball a couple of weeks ago. Ms. Green was my assistant coach. I was the coach, and coach, we had the winning team. I don't know if Dr. Green had the soap down there, but he failed a couple times. But he caught some balls, so I just wanna, it was a great event. Dr. Harris' wife came, she was one of the vendors. And so I think Dr. Green Church was a little upset because he was on my team. But my team was winning because I had all the young people on there, they kicking them balls. But I appreciate him. And also, Dr. Green, we forgot to mention last month that Mr. Blake did that Black History program. You remember they did that, and they had the kids, they had to act out everybody all across the country, and they did a wonderful job. Even the little girl that did me, I really cooked, and they did Dr. Green, and the young man played a good role. But I just want to commend Dr. Blake and everybody that sits with those kids, because they did not read from a paper. They memorized everything, they acted out, they did a phenomenal job.
Thank you. Anybody Staples?
Yes, Jerry Miller, Dr. Green, my fellow board members, as we recall last year, our health took a turn for the worse. We had a house fire in November. I never did forget it because on that night, the county council doing the second reading of the budget for the bonuses for the first responder. But on that night, my wife and I decided we wanted to do something very special for all the first responders in Fairfield County. So with the help of leaders and achievements and Sheriff Bill Montgomery, this coming Saturday, we'll be hosting an event called Meet and Greet First Responders of Fairfield County. We have free face paint, free food, music, live entertainment. Ms. Brown and the family dancer, they'll be there as well as some of the students from magnet schools and high school. So we'll be doing that event at 12 o'clock to 3. Y'all invited to come out. Mr. Sis, thank you again for all of your hard work in the first responders. And please come and join us.
Thanks, sir.
Any more now?
Yes, I would like to ask for prayer for 2 of our former administrators that we lost in the last 2 weeks. We lost Mr. Harvey Chapman, former principal at Kelly Miller Elementary School, and Ms. Evelyn Henry, former principal at McCoy List. Please pray for their families.
Also, I would like to, I'm glad Mr. Davis reminded me that give a shout out to our the lead ladies, I think you could call it. They've been coming in a lot of first and second and the dance and what have you. Big shout out to them. So most definitely. At this time we can we have adjournment.
Motion to adjourn.
Second. Motion made by Terry, second by Mr. Davis. All in favor, show by raising the right hand. You adjourn.
Here we go.
Which got
Dr. Green. And so they. Oh, okay, thank you. Oh, that's a lot of money. Yeah. And then not that many people. She said she gonna check it. Good night.